Hi and welcome back to my channel to this brand new video. Now in this video I want to show you an easy way on how you can connect your sound system to your KNX installation. Now the question is, why should you want to do this? Well, you typically have in KNX devices with a touch display or, for example, also a visualization server where you can control your whole home automation from one system or from one user interface, either the push button sensors or the visualization servers. So why not also connect your sound system to it so that you don't always have to open up the app, so that you can just press a button on your push button sensor and the music immediately starts, or that you can lower the volume, etc. And you can, of course, also use it in combination with automations, like for example, when a scene is called in the living room, that the music or the radio automatically starts. And one way on doing this is with the help of Home Assistant. And there I'll want to show you a blueprint that I developed, which you can use to easily hook up your sound system or your media player within Home Assistant and just hook it up to group addresses and use it with push button sensors and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned, it's pretty simple to do, because the only thing that you need to do is first of all make sure that you have your media player entity within Home Assistant. So in my case, I want to use Sonos, and this is also the main system that I can test this blueprint against. So if you have another system, then please feel free to test the blueprint in depth and send me your feedback on what can be improved, etc. Or if you have any wishes to the blueprint, just let me know. So I'll head over to settings and then to the add-ons and then to devices and services, and in here I'll search for Sonos. And this is actually pretty simple. As you can see, here are my 3 speakers. In my case, I want to use this one here in the bathroom. And so with that, if I'll go back to the overview, we can see here we have the media players. Now that's the first step. The second step now is to import the blueprint. So what we'll want to do is we hop over into the Home Assistant community. So here we have it, and then you can search for categories, Blueprints Exchange, and in here we filter for KNX. And there you can see I just updated the blueprint just recently before I started the recording here. And if you click on it, you can simply click here on Import Blueprint to my Home Assistant. Now don't worry, the version here actually isn't correct. I don't know why, but I can't edit this initial post here. So what we'll have to do in order to see the latest changes is you sadly have to scroll down here, and here you can see the latest change that I did. But let's go back to the top, because the button here will always work. So I'll simply click here Import Blueprint, and now here normally you can just click here on Save. In my case, because I have 2 or multiple Home Assistant installations in my network, I also have to change the address here. Then click on Save, open the link. Then you can either go ahead and check this address here to see the full source code of it, or I'll simply click here on Preview. Then import the blueprint, or here you can also see the content of it again. So import the blueprint, and with that we are ready to go. So here you can see all the blueprints that I've imported in my Home Assistant installation. And if I go over to automations, we can now create the automation based on this blueprint here. So I'll open this blueprint here, and then you can see the first thing that you'll need to do, or first of all some informations here. Here you'll see the version that you are using of the blueprint, because as mentioned, sometimes I will do some updates so you can see if you're on the latest version or not. But now the only thing that is really necessary to do is to specify the media player entity that you want to control. In my case, as I mentioned, I want to control the media player in the bathroom. And with that, I have set up everything that I'll need to set up, because from now on onwards, every setting you'll see here is optional. So if you don't want to use this feature, then simply you don't have to input a group address. But what can you now actually do with the blueprint? Well, I have structured it a little bit with, let's say feature-wise. So first of all, we have the playback controls. Here you simply have controls for play pause, for on off, or for forward and backward. And you just need to enter your group addresses here. And if we head over into the EDS, I have already created the necessary group addresses. Until now, not connected to any push button sensor or display. This is something we will do in a minute, but I've already hooked it up to my Home Assistant bus interface. By the way, if you want to know more about how you can connect KNX to Home Assistant, then I'll definitely would recommend you my video courses over on Udemy. There I'll have a dedicated video course on the topic of KNX in general, but also a video course on the topic of KNX and Home Assistant. And there we start by the basics all the way to more complicated topics, but also very important topics like connecting Home Assistant to KNX in a secure way. So by using KNX Data Secure and also KNX IP Secure, we'll also take a look at automations and much more. So if you support if you want to support my work here on YouTube, then I would be more than happy to maybe see you in one of my video courses. But let's head back to this blueprint here. So as you can see, I have created this group addresses here. And now what I want to do is that I'll enter those group addresses here. And when I enter it, I will also explain to you what this setting in general means. So here, first of all, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, because here we simply have the controls to play and to pause the music. Now here's an additional setting with which you can say, if the music is already playing and you press the play button again, well, then automatically a jump to the next song should be executed. So here in this case, you can see if the music is already playing and a telegram with the value 1 and the group address of play pause is being sent, the next track is being played. Now in my case, I don't want this feature. I want to simply ignore it if I click play again, so therefore I'll disable it. Then for some media players or for some sound systems, you also have the on-off action. Now the Sonos sound system doesn't have that. So if you want to use Sonos, then you simply ignore the setting here. Some sound systems support this on-off feature. Then you can enter those group addresses here. And down below, we have the address for forward or backwards. And down below here, we have the setting for going to the next or to the previous song. With that out of the way, we can head over to the volume control, but I'll want to skip that for a moment and jump directly into the status. Now in KNX we have the limitation that we can send text informations, but only with 14 characters. So therefore you have to bear in mind that maybe the artist or the title and also the album text might be cut off. Now the feature is implemented, so if you want to use it, you can simply enter the group addresses here. In my case, it's the 059, 0510 and 0511. So that is the status. Now let's go back to the volume control, because here you have multiple ways on how you want to implement that, also based on the devices that you want to connect to the sound system. Because first of all, what you have is the volume control. Here in an absolute value. This means that you maybe have a slider element on your touch display or in your visualization server or something else, so that you'll directly send the value of 0 to, or that you'll directly send a value between 0 and 100%, which the sound system will directly jump. In my case, I have it on the address 053, and then we have another option to use it with a 1-bit object, because maybe you have a normal push button sensor, or you have only the buttons for louder, or you only have buttons for louder and quieter. And in this case, you could use this function here. With this function, you can specify a 1-bit group address, and when the value 1 is sent, which you specify here, then the volume is turned up by default 5%. If I change it here to 10, then with every telegram that was sent, the volume would be changed by plus or minus 10%. Now I'll stick here to 5% and enter the group address here. And then, of course, we also need the feedback object, so in percent on how many percent the volume at the moment is. And we also have an option for muting and also a feedback for it. So that's that out of the way. But as you can see, we have another volume control feature. And this is something that I'll add not in the first version of this blueprint, but in a later version. And I think that's a pretty cool feature, because with that you can use the dimming function of a normal push button sensor. So the long button press where you normally dim the light up or dim the light down, to use it in combination with the volume. So by dimming up, you would make the music louder, and by dimming down, you would make it quieter. And so if you want to use this feature, you need to create an helper entity. Now here in this case, I want to give a big shout out to Calimeo, because I basically took a look at his KNX light controls blueprint, where he basically used this feature, and I adapted it here for the volume control. Now for making this work, the only thing that you need to do is that you create a new toggle helper. You can do this all from within here, this blueprint. I'll give it the name volume or media, KNX media control helper. And then we only need to specify the group address to which you then connect the long button press, so the dimming group object. So 058. Then you can manipulate the dim time. I'll leave it here at the default values, and with that we have this relative volume control. So another feature is the scene control, but I would say let us check those functionalities now. So let us hook those group addresses up to some real devices to see how this would work. Now, of course, these settings that I'll show you now here are fully dependent on the device that you'll use. In my case here, I want to show it at the example of the Bosch Room Touch 4, which is a KNX touch display. And then we'll also take a look at how I can connect it to a normal KNX push button sensor to use it there. So the Bosch Room Touch 4 has a DCA application to create the individual pages. And in here I can go ahead, and I've already created this audio control. I quickly rename it in English, so audio control. Quickly disabling here the sources because they'll become relevant when we enter the scenes. And then the cool thing here is that you can specify the object types pretty freely. So what I mean with that is that you can always decide here for this display if you want to have a 1-bit object or a 1 byte value. Now here in this case, the play pause control, remember, was a 1-bit address. So I'll stick here to 1 bit. Then forward backward is enabled because I'll have this functionality. I also need it as a 1-bit. Mute control, the same applies, also a 1-bit with 1 and 0, 1 for muting, 0 for unmuting. Then shuffling and repeating is a functionality that I haven't implemented in the blueprint, so therefore I'll disable it. We have the volume control, and here it becomes really important to take a look at what you have here. So basically this device here supports every 3 methods, so 1 bit, relative dimming, or simply an absolute value, which I want to use, so I'll use a 1 byte value. And then we also have the on-off control. Now I could enable it, but as my Sonos system doesn't support it, I don't need it here. And so with that, we get the following communication or group objects. So what I want to do is I'll head over here into my central functions to music, and then I can hook those addresses, those objects up to their respective addresses. So play pause is here, play and pause Now here the thing is for this device that play and pause have their own group object. However, they'll send the play object will always send a 1 and the pause object always a 0. And then I'll also hook up the status to it. So first of all the sending address, then the response or the status address. Then we have forward, backward. The same applies. Forward will always send the 1, backward always the 0. So therefore I can hook them up to the same address here. Now for forward, backward, I basically don't need a status address, so I only have this group address. Then we have the absolute volume control. First of all, the control address, then the status address. And we have the mute address, the status address. And then we have title, artist, and album, which I'll also have here. And I'm sorry for the German title here. Then we have artist, and last but not least, the album. And with that, I'll have connected those group addresses to their respective group objects, and we can quickly test that out. So here you now see the audio control element. From here I can start or stop the music. And if I go here on the 3 dots, you can see the current song that is playing, the artist, and in this case also the title of the song. Here I can either mute or unmute your song. So if I play, now I don't hear anything. If I unmute, I can hear it now in the background playing. If I also hit play. Now if we go ahead with this button, I can go to the next song. So moving through all the different titles here in this playlist. Then we have the audio control. And last but not least, this is what we want to take a look at in a moment. So here you can see this is the absolute volume control. Here we have the normal play controls, and this is just a quick window when swiping through the display to quickly start and stop the music. But as I just saw or heard in the background, everything is working as intended. So those were the settings for the audio control here for the Room Touch 4. Now I mentioned that you could also use a normal push button sensor to also control the music. And this is what I want to do now quickly. So I'll go ahead and add a normal push button. So here you can see I have this normal push button sensor. And now what I want to do is that with the first rocker I want to start and stop the music, while with the second rocker I want to control the volume via the dimming feature. So what I do for that is that I'll go ahead and first of all set the first rocker as switching, so on off is perfect. And then we have rocker 2, and here I want to have it as dimming. And then I'll also want to control the LEDs. So in this case I want to use both rockers, the LEDs, to display when music is playing. So here in this case I want to have it controlled via a separate LED object. So then I'll go ahead into the group objects, and in here we want to connect it to the group addresses. So first of all, going ahead into the music, play pause for the first rocker, and the status goes to all of the LEDs, so that when the music is playing, the LEDs are on. And then for the second rocker, we can now only go ahead and connect the dimming object to it. But what I also want to do is that I want to use the switching object, so the short button press, to mute and unmute. So I'll go ahead, rocker 2, mute, and then dimming is in this case for volume relative, where I'll have it here. So volume relative, and maybe go ahead and use the LED on the rocker 2, not for the play pause information, but for the mute and unmute status. So with that, I'll go ahead and quickly program this device. So now here on this left push button I have play and pause. So if I hit play, you can see that here the LEDs change, and you can also see in the Home Assistant dashboard that the music now is playing. And if I go ahead on the right hand side and click here on the top, I muted it. If I click here, I unmute it, and by pressing long here I can basically change the volume now here with relative dimming. And if the speed for you is too high in which the volume changes, you can just simply manipulate it with the dimming curve that you can set up in the blueprint. So this is how you can either use a push button sensor, a normal push button sensor, or for example also a touch display. And now we want to take a look at the last feature that is also implemented. If I head over into the settings and into the automations into the blueprint, what we can see is down below here we have the scene control. And with that we can use scenes to start playlists or a radio or something else. Now in the case of Sonos, you have to add it to your Sonos favorites in order to use this feature. So whatever playlist or radio sender you want to start with the scene, you first of all need to head over into the Sonos app, and there you need to add the playlist or radio sender to your Sonos favorites, and then you can use this name here. So what you can do is you can use a normal scene group address, and this is what I have also prepared here in the EDS. So here down below we have the scene group address, so 0512, and then we have up to 8 scenes to which this blueprint can react. And for each scene we can specify which number it represents in KNX. So in my case I want to start with the value 1. Then I specify the playlist or radio sender that I want to start. In my case here it's my Super Mix, which is a playlist that I have in my Sonos favorites. And then I can specify a volume that should be tuned to. Now here the volume can either be the value 101, which means the volume doesn't change from where it currently is, or you can also say you want to have it as a specific volume, for example 10%. Then I can go ahead and add another scene so that we just see the difference. So scene number 2, and here I want to play a radio sender, in my case Radio Bob. And the volume here in this case I don't want to change. And an additional option is to not use the scene object or the scene group address, but you can also use a 1-bit group address. And when to this group address a 1 is being sent, when then this specific playlist or radio sender with this specific volume is being tuned to, so basically this scene is called, and with a 0 to this group address, it pauses basically the music, but I would say feel free to play around with that feature. With that set up, I can save it. And what we can do is, for example, this Room Touch 4-inch display. When I head over into the DCA, into the page with the audio control, you can see that this one supports multiple sources from which I can choose from. And in my case, I have 2 sources, in my case a playlist and a radio. And here you can see that we can specify a 1 byte value that should be sent, and a 1 byte value is basically a scene. So what I can do with that is here I'll call scene number 1. Remember, scene 1 is the value 0 and scene 2 is the value 1. So with this setup, I can go into the group objects, and here those 2 sources I now simply need to hook up to this scene address. So here, scenes. And with that, with the first source I call scene number 1, and with the second source I call scene number 2. I'll quickly program it and then we'll take a look at it. Before we head over to the touch display, because I have downloaded it now, I quickly want to show you something, because with the favorites it's a little bit cumbersome, because you really need to specify the correct string within the favorites that you want to play. And for Sonos you can get the favorites that you currently have if you head over to Devices and Services, Sonos, then you check the entities, and here you have a Sonos favorite sensor. This one has to be enabled first. This will now take a little bit. And if we head over into the current states, what we should soon see here are the favorites. And here you can see all the Sonos favorites that we have, and those are the strings that you need to specify. So I'll go ahead, Radio Bob, and enter it in my blueprint, because this was actually something that where I have a misspelling. So quickly enter it here. And yeah, as I said, this needs to be the exact same string as in the favorites. So I click here on save, and now we can head over to the touch display. So now back at the touch display, here you can see the audio control, and if I go ahead, first of all, change the volume here. So roughly, let's say 30 or 40%. And if I go ahead and click here on playlist, what you should see is that the volume changes to the exact value that we set up in the blueprint, so 10%, and the music starts playing. Now if I change the volume, make it a little bit louder, and change here to radio, we can see that the music now changes to the radio sender. And if I go ahead, you can also see that the volume sticks to the value, because here we set it up to 101, which means don't change the volume. Now if I go back and to the playlist, you can see the music starts playing again, and now with the reduced volume. And so that's the blueprint that you can freely use within Home Assistant to connect your media players to KNX. And as I mentioned, you can basically connect every media player entity with that to KNX. Not only Sonos, but also other systems. However, I personally could only check the Sonos system. Now, I hope that this blueprint and especially the video for that were helpful for you. If you now have any recommendations or any problems with this blueprint, then let me know either in the comment section here down below or in the community forum of Home Assistant. I have linked you both, so the community from Home Assistant as well as the blueprint down below in the video description. And I would say, if you enjoyed the video, consider a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss out on any new videos. And with that, I would say, I'll see you in the next video. So, bye bye.